Imagine walking into a supermarket in the United States and seeing a refrigerated shelf filled with milk, whole milk, low-fat milk, skim milk, almond milk, oat milk, soy milk, even lactose-free milk. But there is one type of milk you will rarely see: buffalo milk. And that's strange, because buffalo milk isn't some exotic liquid produced by a handful of animals. Water buffalo are raised by hundreds of millions of people around the world, especially across South Asia, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and parts of Europe. In fact, water buffalo are responsible for a huge share of the world's buffalo milk production. So why don't Americans, Canadians, Australians, or most Europeans drink it every day? The answer isn't that buffalo milk is bad. In several ways, it's remarkably rich. Buffalo milk generally contains substantially more fat and total solids than ordinary cow's milk. Depending on the breed, feed, and season, buffalo milk can contain around 6 to 8% fat, while typical cow's milk is closer to 3 to 4%. That extra fat changes everything. Buffalo milk is thicker, creamier, and richer. It also contains significant amounts of protein, calcium, phosphorus, and other nutrients. And that richness makes it incredibly valuable for producing certain dairy products. Mozzarella di bufala, for example, is traditionally made from Italian Mediterranean buffalo milk. Buffalo milk is also used for yogurt, butter, cream, paneer, ghee, and numerous other dairy products. So if buffalo milk is nutritious and delicious, why didn't it replace cow's milk in the West? The first clue is sitting in the history of agriculture. Modern Western dairy systems were built around cattle. For thousands of years, European societies selected cattle for milk production, meat, temperament, size, and their ability to survive local conditions. The cow became deeply embedded in the agricultural system. Farmers learned how to breed cows. They built barns for cows. They developed specialized milking equipment for cows. They created transportation systems for cow's milk. And eventually, an enormous commercial industry formed around it. Once an entire food system is built around one animal, replacing it becomes extremely difficult. Buffalo faced another problem. Water buffalo aren't simply giant cows. They have different environmental requirements and behaviors. Many water buffalo thrive in hot and humid environments, and they have a strong relationship with water. Wallows are important for thermoregulation because buffalo have relatively dark skin and fewer functional sweat glands than cattle, making cooling themselves in hot conditions more difficult. In regions where buffalo evolved and were traditionally raised, farmers adapted their systems around these characteristics. But large-scale dairy farming in much of the Western world developed under very different conditions. That doesn't mean buffalo can't live in Western countries. They absolutely can. Italy has a famous buffalo dairy industry. Buffalo farms also exist in parts of the United States, Australia, and other Western countries. The problem is scale. There are enormous numbers of cattle already producing milk. A supermarket doesn't need to introduce another animal unless consumers are willing to pay enough to justify the additional production costs. And this is where economics becomes extremely important. A dairy farmer isn't simply selling milk. They're operating an entire biological and industrial system. They need land, feed, water, veterinary care, milking equipment, refrigeration, transportation, processing facilities, packaging, distribution, and a reliable customer base. Cattle already fit perfectly into that system. Buffalo milk would require additional specialized supply chains while competing against a product consumers already know. Why take that risk? There is also the question of production. Modern dairy cattle have been selectively bred to produce enormous quantities of milk. Some high-producing dairy cows can produce many thousands of liters during a lactation. Buffalo can also be highly productive, but their milk is usually valued more for its concentration of fat and solids than simply for producing huge volumes of liquid milk. That distinction matters. If you're making a glass of everyday drinking milk, volume is extremely important. If you're making premium cheese, butter, or other concentrated dairy products, high solids become much more valuable. This helps explain why buffalo milk found a different niche. Instead of becoming the default drinking milk, it became a specialized ingredient. And then there is culture. This may be the biggest reason of all. Food habits are incredibly difficult to change. In the United States, children grow up drinking cow's milk. Milk cartons, school cafeterias, cereal, coffee, cheese, ice cream, and countless recipes are built around it. In South Asia, the situation is different. Buffalo milk has been part of traditional diets and dairy production for generations. In India and Pakistan, buffalo milk is especially important because its high fat content makes it useful for products such as ghee and rich dairy dessert. The animal itself also has enormous cultural and agricultural importance. So when someone in India hears buffalo milk, it doesn't sound unusual. But to someone raised in a Western supermarket, cow's milk feels like the default. And once something becomes the default, alternatives have to overcome a massive psychological barrier. There is also a subtle culinary difference. If you pour buffalo milk into your morning coffee, the experience can be different because of its higher fat and solids content. It can taste richer and feel heavier. For some consumers, that's a benefit. For others, it simply isn't what they expect from ordinary drinking milk. And that is an important distinction. A food doesn't need to be worse to lose the popularity contest. It just needs to arrive after another food has already won. Cow's milk became deeply integrated into Western agriculture centuries before modern consumers had access to dozens of alternative beverages. By the time buffalo milk could have expanded into Western supermarkets, the cow dairy industry was already enormous. And there is one final twist. The Western world is already starting to rediscover buffalo milk, but often without realizing it. You may order buffalo mozzarella at an expensive Italian restaurant. You may buy yogurt made from buffalo milk. You may eat a dessert containing buffalo dairy. The ingredient is entering Western food culture through premium products rather than replacing ordinary cow's milk. So why don't we drink buffalo milk in the Western world? Not because buffalo milk is inferior. Not because it is unsafe. And not because buffalo are incapable of producing nutritious dairy. The real reason is much more interesting. History built the Western dairy industry around the cow. Once that happened, everything followed: the farms, the breeding programs, the machinery, the factories, the trucks, the supermarkets, the recipes, and the habits of billions of consumers. Buffalo milk never needed to lose a nutritional competition. It simply never entered the race on equal terms. And perhaps that's the strangest lesson about food. The thing sitting in your refrigerator isn't always there because it is the best option. Sometimes it's there because, hundreds of years ago, someone chose an animal, and the entire world built an industry around it.